stands for. It's the 10th grade interdisciplinary program. And I mean, the interdisciplinary piece of it is that it's not a co-taught model, but rather a team of teachers with a kind of small cohort of students who actively try and connect the content and skills between our classes.
English, history, physics, and geometry. And as much as possible, we try to make it interdisciplinary. So that means project-based that connects as many classes as possible. So the goal is always to connect all 4 classes, and worst case scenario, only 2 classes.
We organize our lessons around a single theme or a single initiative. And we have probably 4 of those throughout the year.
And though we're not in the same room together, we plan projects and lessons that have crossover skills and content so that students can see connections between each of our subjects.
We have both individual curriculum, like in physics or math, that kind of correlate with the state standards. But then we also have, we try and develop projects where, in the genocide project was an example of that, the memorial project, we referred to it.
The entire program went on a field trip to Boston. We went around and looked at what was already there, some memorials to inspire us, and the students got an idea of what that could actually look like.
It's like a pretty fun experience to do like with all our teachers and like friends and classes, and like go look at like memorials and stuff like that, like really get the background behind it. It feels definitely more like as a group and like more like collaboration and like understanding.
In my class, we read a memoir by a survivor of the Rwandan genocide, kind of as just background information, but also for students to see the kind of human side of genocide.
And then in physics and in geometry, they learned the math and science principles behind actually the designing of it and building a structure.
They use their knowledge of scale and proportion to create something that would actually be realistic. They went through the phases of design with their physics teacher that they had modeled after a previous egg drop product. And ultimately, at the end, they created a scaled model in the Da Vinci lab. So we utilized help from the engineering teachers and from the art teachers in helping them actually make their ideas come to life.
They presented the actual model to scale with historical evidence about their topic to an audience that came, which was a series of parents, administrators, friends in other classes, and just kind of a celebration of their works.
And then in my class at the end of it, we came back and students wrote a letter to a government official lobbying that their memorial be built, and through that really reflected on why they made particular choices.
All the teachers are very connected, so all the classes can be very flowy.
I would describe it as like, people working together and like teachers communicating about what they're doing.
I would describe it as a better way to connect classes and learn about things and how they apply to the real world.
I think they worked harder this year to connect classes rather than last year. I think last year was great also, but I think this year it was taking the experience from the 9 IP and adding it to the 10 IP, making it a better program for everybody.
Having teachers that's always like on the same task and like not like overboarding with work from like different classes, like they don't communicate with each other. So it's like you just like get stacked and stacked, and it's like, all right, like there's no point even doing it anymore. It's like overwhelming. So like with being in IP, it's like they can collaborate with each other and really talk to each other, and it like helps a lot.
I really like working with other people. I think working with other people is a skill that is going to get used later in life and is so important. So like, why not learn it now?
We can see the connections between subjects in like learning about how like certain things play out in the real world together with like how they've happened historically.
In other classes, like we do projects and stuff that doesn't really correlate to our other classes. So it's like if you have a project in this class and have a project in another class, it's just like, all right, and then you just like keep doing it. It's just like gets stacked and stacked when like an actual like in IP it's more like understandable, and like you get like your other teachers know what's happening, so you don't just like, so you actually have their time to like put in the work that you have to do.
I think what's great about interdisciplinary learning is that students can see the connections, they can see what's happening in their classes are all connected, and there's a purpose.
It's one of the most supportive environments available. So your kids are still going to learn the exact same information. You just have a bunch of teachers who are talking about the same set of kids. So the 4 of us know what's happening in all the other classes. So an example, one of the best things that we do is We talk about when our assessments are. So your students are never going to get 4 tests on all the same day. We really try to space it out. And so this way the kids can be devoted to preparing for like their geometry test. For example, I knew that they had a geometry test today. We had 10 minutes in class, so I said, get out your geometry notes.
We're drawing on skills in a number of different areas, ability to research and connect social and historical contact, or develop social and historical context, practice writing and organizing our thoughts, computations from math, and spatial reasoning from both math and physics.
We work as a team. We sometimes send communication home to parents from the team about what we're seeing across the board. So we just have a more holistic picture of the student. So we can be a little bit more supportive. It's very much about building relationships. And if you don't know what IP stands for, it just means, I would say it means community, and it means relationship and support.
I think the biggest takeaway from the memorial projects is the student engagement was at the highest level that we've seen all year. Students were really excited about it. They were challenged. They were really thinking about solving problems, and really observing students having a lot of aha moments during the process was really cool.
Success looks different at different times for different students, right? And I think the first time that I saw like students realize success in themselves this was before winter break, where Deanna and I had pulled together our math and science classes together. We were in the cafeteria, and we were in kind of a competition of review material for both math and physics. And before we kind of started into that gameplay, what we did is that we had students in groups of 3 in 10 minutes research a famous scientist or famous mathematician, and then present on it right then and there. No practice, no nothing. And they pulled it together in 10 minutes, and they put a slide together, and they stood up and presented it without any practice, if you would, and without any extra preparation. And I think the kids were like, oh, I didn't know I could do that. And to me, that was one of the kind of moments of success, both from us as teachers, but I think because we saw the students realize that they could do something that they didn't think they could do.
I think the piece that got them excited was the real world application of this. Like, this is something that is very practical, like the need to build things, right? Like, this is something we went on a field trip a couple months ago when we saw actual memorials around Boston, and somebody had to come up with those plans and design them and think about why they made particular choices, and why they chose to put them in the middle of Boston Common. So it was very practical. And I also saw kids really come alive in the Da Vinci lab, where they really got to work hands-on with the 3D printer and the laser cutter, and they get to like physically build up what this memorial could look like. And what I think was most refreshing was that some students who don't always excel with traditional modes of learning were the ones who really shined. And so I think it was a really cool opportunity to give kids who really benefit from hands-on learning an opportunity to do so.
When they were thinking about building their memorials, they kind of struggled with figuring out what the real life measurements are. So for example, one of the groups made a bench that was about 6 feet in depth. And when they built their product and they really thought about it, nobody sits on a bench that is 6 feet in width. So they came up with these situations that in real life, what they had built really wouldn't be realistic. And they had to kind of go back to the drawing board and figure out how to make something that would actually be in a memorial. And that was really kind of cool.
A lot of the challenges revolved around the math component. Like the math was hard, right? To figure out like an accurate scale of like how big you want this to be in real life. I think the other challenge was maybe having some big aspirations and dreams of what they wanted to accomplish, and realizing that some of their choices maybe weren't as practical or realistic as they thought. So that I think was a good learning experience for them, of like how to come up with creative solutions and be able to create something interesting that's like within their power.
Our feedback that the students gave us was that they didn't have enough time in history class. that they needed more time to really have a better, deeper, richer understanding of their genocide. We didn't know that until it came to the actual presentation in front of adults, and they felt like they were a little bit weaker in that area, and so I had an understanding that I need to better support the kids. What was great about this process was we were very much focused on like design thinking. So taking your idea from like a sketch, right, and trying multiple iterations to see what would actually translate into like the 3D printer and using the Da Vinci Lab, and just what is actual, what are you actually able to do within the constraints of, you know, the 3D printer's ability. Had you made a design that's going to take the printer a week to print, you got to go back. And so as much as that was a challenge for students, we had the opportunity for them to make multiple iterations, multiple drafts, and like that was what was a major part of this project, was trying something out. It doesn't work, go back to the drawing board.
I think it has so much value for students. One, I think the sense of community that it brings students in such a big school just cannot be replicated. It's so nice. And I've heard students say this too, but even from my perspective, it's so nice to have this kind of smaller community and a place that's a little bit safer. You tend to they know each other so much more than I feel like they do in a non-IP program. And I feel like I've gotten to know the students much more in this setting because I see them in other capacities too, and I can talk to them about what they're doing in science class or what they're doing in math. And I don't always have that ability. You know, we all are in our own silos, and again, in such a big school, it's always really difficult to know what they're doing in their other classes. And I think what it also brings students is an ability to see real-world applications of their learning, because outside of high school, when they go to have a job, all of the fields that they're going to go into have some sort of interdisciplinary component, right? Like they're going to need all of these skills, and I think it's important that they see how the content areas really work together, and how it's kind of more realistic to think about them in that way as always being interconnected.
Working together is a challenge, and I think sometimes students think they know how to work together, and they really don't. And even adults, you know, we think we know how to work together, and yeah, okay, we've practiced it a bit more, but we don't. And each situation presents different, you know, you may have expertise in one area, I have an expertise in this area, and kind of learning that about one another and what you can each bring to the table takes time. And then figuring out how to leverage that expertise that we each bring. And that's collaboration, and we're learning how to do that. And students in particular, I think they know how to do that, but are realizing that it's harder than they thought.
Luckily, the school has been really supportive and understands that this is going to take a lot of time. This is something where we have to build from scratch. So on one hand, we are bound by, you know, state curriculum, state standards, the MCAS at the end of the year, so we still have to teach all of our state standards. However, we have time and meeting that's carved out of the school schedule to be able for all 4 teachers to meet together to try to find and build this curriculum. Because like I said, we are building from scratch. There is a lot of interdisciplinary curriculum that exists at the elementary school level, which is great and wonderful, but at like high level physics, high level geometry, the skills that they need for 10th grade, it doesn't exist. So we are truly creating this curriculum from scratch. So it is some work over the summer and then time together to really just build it from the ground up.
I think the end product was really cool. When we have other history classes here at Needham High School that also build memorials, but because of the integration of the geometry and that it had to be to scale, the way that the scaled models came out, they were just really impressive. And so a lot of folks around the school building who have seen past projects really commented on how impressive the student product was here in this project, because we made them scale it to real life. We used the Da Vinci Lab, we used the 3D printer, we used the laser cutter, and it just really came out with a top-notch product, and I'm really proud of the students for doing that.
I think the thing that I'm getting out of it most in this first year is really understanding the teaching styles, the content of my colleagues. And I think the better we understand one another, who we are and how we think and operate, the better it is, the easier it is, and for us to collaborate as a teaching staff. And then if we're highly collaborative as a teaching staff, I think that's infectious to our students.
When I look back at what my personal success of this year is designing more authentic reading and writing experiences for students. Because of the interdisciplinary nature of the class has really forced me to think about what reading and writing skills do my students really need to be successful outside of high school.
Parents were really happy to come and share in what their kids were doing, so it just felt like we even expanded the community out from our students to meet the parents. You know, there's a follow-up. We met a lot of parents during open house. You never see them again, right? Like maybe there's one-way communication, it's over email, or maybe you have an IEP meeting, but this actually meant that we got to see the parents and see what their perspective was and have a conversation. So that was kind of a surprising success we've had. We also have the ability there's a little bit of flexibility, and we can really change up the dynamics of the kids and change up the classes as we want amongst the four of us. So we can be really thoughtful in group dynamics as well. So like seeing that play out and partnering new people was really a success that you don't always get the autonomy to do in a non-IP class.
This was the first year of the 10 IP program. We've been running the 9 IP program for a few years, but this was the first year that we had 10th grade. And honestly, I've been teaching for 25 years, and this is the first time I've ever even done a project. So it was really a big undertaking, but really exciting, and I hope I have the opportunity again to do it so I can build on the experience and improve it from where we started this year.
Needham is very aspirational in that it would love that your courses and all of your projects and all your curriculum is always attaining 21st century skills, making sure that you are connecting to Portrait of a Needham graduate, which if you're not familiar is basically preparing students beyond high school to be great citizens who are prepared for any role that they take in society. And we think that this IP model is an example, a great example and conduit for the kids to be able to really practice those skills that you are not, like in isolated silos, that you are going to be able to, in any job, you got to bring a lot of skills to the table. And how do you do that across curriculum? And IP has kind of, does a great job of providing those opportunities for students to really kind of prepare for life beyond Needham.
Progress.